history for our Panhandle Plains Historical Museum in Canyon. I guess I kind of started this cemetery tour thing. We did an exhibit about the history of Llanos Cemetery 4 or 5 years ago. I spent days out here learning about the cemetery, and one of the more interesting parts of the cemetery to me is the gypsy graves. There's at least a dozen gypsies graves here in this part of the cemetery. However, this whole section is not gypsy. There's just about a dozen graves here and across the road over here. Most of them are gypsy kings and queens. Gypsies live in extended family groups called clans, and the head of the clan is the senior person, the senior male in that group. He's called a king, his wife is called a queen. When he dies, the next king is the next person with seniority, and his wife is the queen. And if the old queen is still living, she's regarded with a great deal of respect, just like she had when her husband was alive. It's kind of interesting that among the gypsies in this extended family, if you work, you don't spend your money. You give it to the king, and the king gives you an allowance. It's almost a communistic type of system. And so then if you want to buy a car, you go to the king, and he says yes or no. If you want to get married, you go to the king, he says yes or no. Gypsies, at least until maybe more recent times, insisted that their children marry other gypsies, not outside of the gypsy ethnic group. And they are an ethnic group. There have been some scientific studies done on the DNA of gypsies. It indicates that they originated in Afghanistan, and of course that's where we're waging a war right now. They migrated into Eastern Europe, into Western Europe, and into England hundreds of years ago. And they came to America before there was a United States, along with other colonists from England and with other people from various parts of Europe. They continued to come to the United States during the 19th century, early 20th century, and that they may even still come today. I don't know that. But they were a part of American life from the 1700s right on through the 1800s and early 1900s. I grew up in San Angelo. My dad and my aunt grew up there too, and they remembered gypsies coming to the San Angelo area once a year and camping on the river and making willow furniture. They were still doing that when I was a child in the 1950s. And they would peddle that willow furniture up and down the streets of San Angelo, and they would tell fortunes, and my grandparents always worried that they would try to steal my brother and I, although I think if they had stolen us, they would have turned us loose by sunrise. I don't believe they would have wanted to keep either one of us. And in any event, they earned the reputation, deserved or not, of being thieves and child nappers. But they also were fortune tellers, they were musicians, they did odd jobs, and they didn't live very long in one place. When I was in the 2nd grade, a little girl named Rose Montgomery, a gypsy child, was apprehended by the truant officers. And she was brought to our school and enrolled in our school and given school books, and she lasted about 10 days or 2 weeks, and then she disappeared with her school books. Gypsies homeschooled their children before we had the concept of homeschooling. They taught them to read and write and do enough math to count their money. They were very oriented into making money and keeping it. And these tombstones are testimony to the fact that gypsies had plenty of money. The king took care of it. Of course, he got everybody's money and took care of it and made money out of it. And these tombstones testify to the fact that they had money. They also liked expensive jewelry. When they had their funerals, and I've been told by several people that saw these funerals, there were about a dozen funerals from the 1950s to 1996. They hand dug the grave, they put a fence around it that was open at the east end with a gate, because of the belief that many people have that on Resurrection Day people rise facing the rising sun and walk out of their grave, and so the open gate symbolizes that. When they get the coffin down in the grave, they open the lid, and people come by and put a handful of dirt and drop gifts down into the grave. It might be a bottle of whiskey, it might be a 6-pack of beer, it might be a carton of cigarettes, money, jewelry. One person told me that he personally saw a $1,000 bill drop down into a coffin. on one of these tours a couple of years ago, a lady suggested it would have been someone would write a check for $1,000 and drop it down into the well. I think that's what I would do. It's the intent, isn't it? Isn't that's what's important here too? In any event, we understand there are thousands of dollars in these graves. And everybody's had an opportunity to do that. They shut the coffin, they back a cement truck up in here, pour cement on top of the coffin, fill it in with dirt, and then a few weeks later put these covers on the graves. Archaeologists, perhaps 4,000 years from now, will discover if that's true or not, just like over in Egypt. The earliest grave was in 1909, and it's right across the road. It's Lola Arian, A-R-I-O-N, is George Evans, and he died in a motel, and I don't believe that I found an obituary for him either. And yeah, there's a rosary on here, so I guess that doesn't really make any difference, but they tend to be either Roman Catholic or Greek Orthodox. As they went across Europe, they naturally intermarried with other groups of people and introduced other DNA.